I should probably talk about it more on LinkedIn, but it'd probably offend some people. Some guiding principles are this. Marketers...
Wait, hold on. People talk about things on LinkedIn and they're not trying to offend people?
Well, they're all consultants that do that. So,
sorry, keep going.
Here's what go-to-market teams are missing. Proof. That's what I think of every morning when I fire up LinkedIn and scroll through boring manifestos and endless lukewarm takes. Opinions are cheap and proof is gold. I'm Mark Huber and this is The Proof Point, a show from User Evidence that helps go-to-market teams find ideas, get frameworks, and swap tactics. Each episode includes an unfiltered discussion with the biggest names in B2B SaaS to help find the proof points that I'm in search of. You'll learn from sales, marketing, and customer success leaders in the trenches, where I ask them, seriously, what actually works for you? One of our guests actually told me, this felt like we were having drinks at a bar and talking about work without all the BS. And that pretty much sums it up and why I'm so excited for this new show. Join us every other week for new episodes. Hot takes, always welcome.
So we're actually trying something new on this episode of The Proof Point. So I know that people love to get in the internet mud and fight all the time on LinkedIn, but this episode is actually inspired by a post that I saw just last week from Rob Kaminsky over at Fletch. And he called out Calendly in a respectful way for what they were doing on their homepage. And Jeff Hardizin, their head of product marketing, wanted to kind of defend himself in the comments, and he was looking for an opportunity to do so. Well, funny enough, my CEO, Evan Huck, volunteered me for this in the comments, and I didn't realize that. I'll tell more about that story as we get into it. But you'll get to hear both from Rob and Jeff on what went into the Calendly homepage experiment and why. This was really interesting. It was really the Rob and Jeff show, and I promise you will take a ton away from this, especially if you're working at a company that needs to blend a hybrid PLG sales-led motion. Enjoy.
B2B SaaS homepages. Why have they gotten out of hand? We're pretty aggressive for how we think about what we call shitty messaging on homepages. I think there's a lot of things that drive this. A couple things that come to mind. I think there's been an over-indexing on this concept of selling the benefits, sell the outcomes as marketers and salespeople. That's proliferated, especially through B2B. And I think it has a lot of merit. But I think what's happening is we're putting too much emphasis on what closes the deal. Like, what's the last thing that happened? Why did they buy? And we're forgetting about the actual experience. Like, what did they even come to the page for in the first place, right? Knowing that a lot of B2B products are very complex, there's going to be sales cycles. We got to talk through the repercussions and how we're going to set them up and how it's going to customize my business. All of that gets sidestepped, and we just try and speak directly to the ultimate decision maker, which brings a lot of these companies into a space where they just end up overpromising. And then it gets even worse when it's like, oh yeah, that's the promise, but then how do we dress it up? And so when we see then brand type messaging creep in with what we call this multi-order benefit and outcome messaging, you're left with these homepages where you're like, what the hell is this thing? Mark and I were chatting before we got on of like how we even started Fletch, because this is the problem we're trying to solve. We literally started by looking at thousands and thousands of B2B SaaS homepages. And across the board, there was just this theme of like, what the heck is this thing? I can't even figure out what it is. Of course, it's going to prevent me from taking the first step. And so I'm excited to hash that out with Jeff and Mark today as we talk a little bit about Calendly, but more about B2B homepages in general as it relates to messaging.
So if you're watching this episode right now and you've watched previous episodes before, there are only 3 faces and there are not 4 faces like the typical format. And that is because this is not the typical episode. So I'm excited about this. But before we get into really the meat of this, Rob and Jeff, I got a funny story to tell you about how this episode came about for me. So maybe one of you starts with what happened as far as the LinkedIn post, and then I'll get to how we are here right now and how I actually found out about recording this episode, because I did not know about this.
you know, what's great is I've admired Fletch's work for a long time. I think they are really good at helping people that are in early stage startups in particular, other companies too, but early stage startups and maybe pure PLG companies that want to drive a sign up and really understand what the thing is they're signing up to use. I think they're awesome at it. And I think they've done a great job over the last year, really tearing down a lot of different, companies' websites, as well as just giving generic advice about it. They have done, they're Calendly customers, so we love them. That's my disclaimer. I had to say that. And They've done several posts about how much they like Calendly's messaging. And all these posts, of course, I send to my boss and say, look how much they love our messaging, including against, your former employer. But there was one first time ever, there was a post that they did where they were kind of questioning some of the homepage messaging, particularly around business outcomes. And I just thought, I think a lot of people that work in companies, particularly bigger ones, are air towards diplomatic. I thought it'd be fun to just join in. And most people don't join in. I've never seen anybody really join in that's from a bigger company with your all's debates. I thought I would because I want to have fun with them. So that's where we are.
Love it. So before we get into that, now comes the funny story. So we had a marketing leader dinner in Chicago last week, because this all came about in the last week-ish. And I remember seeing Rob's post originally, but then didn't really think anything of it, like changing what I was going to be doing in the next week in any way. So at this dinner, Anthony, Rob's business partner at Fletch, was there. And he told me, hey, I saw you're recording with Rob and with Jeff. And then I have this look on my face, like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know anything about this. And he kept, sharing what was going on. And then I went to look into the comments of the post, and my CEO, Evan, my boss, he tagged me in just like another comment to that post. He did not tag me in the comment that offered up our podcast for this forum. So I had no idea this was going on until Anthony was like, hey, you should probably get that invite out. So long story short, we made it happen. I'm excited for this. And like we were talking about earlier before we started to record, this will be fun. This is a well-intentioned conversation. This is not some political debate, because if it was, I would not record or want to listen to it. So I'm excied, ready to get to it.
There's some irony in your boss asking you to do this, because that's something I'm sure Rob and I are going to talk about later.
100%. I'm glad Jeff latched onto it. That's awesome. Yeah, let's do it.
I love it. All right. So Jeff, since the original post was written by Rob, and you had a small opportunity to defend yourself in the comments, why don't you get us started and just explain why Calendly's homepage is written the way that it is right now?
Yeah. And if I can just, I'm just going to share some visuals here. Okay. So I think it's important to kind of know why companies do what they do. And I think one thing that's happened is the emergence of 3 different business models. You got the self-serve or PLG model, some people call it. You got sales-led, where salespeople are doing some of the closing. And then you got the hybrid model, which Calendly is. This has dramatically affected how B2B marketers do messaging. Okay. Before, for 20 plus years, it was all about sales-led in software. As a marketer, you would maybe tell some of the messaging or be able to convey some of the brand, but it was all about really delivering demos to the sales team, right? And then they would do a lot of the storytelling. What PLG did and self-serve was said, hey, maybe we don't even need a sales team. Maybe we're going to let the website itself do a lot of the selling as well as the product. Okay. So that really turned messaging, upside down. And you saw a bunch of self-serve companies starting in probably like the late, early 2000s that were saying, hey, let's operate more like a consumer company and really just say in basic terms what this product does. And it might just be what someone would call a feature, not a whole company. And, these self-serve companies were typically just targeting individuals, ICs that were going to use the feature. They can maybe use it for free. They can maybe use their own credit card to pay for it, but they probably didn't have always the economic authority to say, hey, we're going to buy this for our entire team. The challenge to the self-serve messaging model was that it was more difficult, to be able to get IT to help buy, to maybe land larger deals with VPs that could be stickier. So what ended up happening was they returned back to the sales-led model. And we all know the sales-led model, there's been a lot of bad messaging in sales-led software for years, where it's just about kind of jargon, or it's about maybe just business outcomes, where it will only say like end-to-end solutions, right? Like that was like a big joke in B2B SaaS software in sales-led. The upside to sales-led is that it can help PLG companies like us be able to close those bigger deals, because IT decision makers in big companies, VPs in big companies, et cetera, not only they want that human touch, but they want that business case messaging. And like, Rob has said, actual hand-holding around developing a business case. The downside to sales-led is it doesn't scale well. A lot of sales-led companies are taking a hit with Wall Street because you have to hire so many salespeople in order to close those deals versus let the product itself or marketers do the work. The other downside is it doesn't have the organic freemium adoption PLG does. So I think the ultimate model, but it's the hardest to do marketing for, is the hybrid model. And that is where you benefit both from that freemium adoption. However, you need to message simply for that freemium adoption, as well as you can help land the bigger deals with the sales team. Now, the sales team is oftentimes very slim. It's a very small sales team department because remember, a lot of PLG companies don't want to have a big sales team for many different reasons, cultural as well as economic. And so you can't just let the sales team be a huge team that does all the storytelling for you. You still have to let the product and the website do some of that storytelling. Now, the downside to this, I think, even though it's a really fun opportunity at a company like Calendly or Asana does this or Slack, you have to be able to communicate succinctly, sometimes in just one page, both the individual IC feature benefit as well as the business outcomes. Okay. So a lot of times the way this looks, and you'll see this all over Calendly's marketing materials, when we're just trying to get somebody to sign up for free, which is one of the main things we do try to do, and you'll see that in our website, The Hero, we will use very basic direct messaging around what this thing does. So we'll say like, reduce the back and forth of finding a time with Calendly, sign up for free. Because we're trying to optimize to get people to sign up for free who might not have any economic buying authority. They might be 1 year out of college as an SDR, but we want them using the product. Now, the sales-led companies, and I'm kind of joking here, but they'll oftentimes use this type of messaging where it's like, Gartner has listed our appointment scheduling platform in its Magic Quadrant. You should use this because it reduces total cost of ownership. You're embracing digital transformation. We've all seen that kind of messaging. And of course, it kind of become laughable. But when you're in a sales-led company, you understand why they're doing it because they're using this messaging to inspire the IT leader a lot of times who doesn't use the product, doesn't even care, but has to govern all the products and wants to ensure that this is serving some type of business outcome. Interview any kind of CIO in a big company. They don't care about what the product does. A lot of times they just care about what the business outcomes are. So where this makes it really challenging as a hybrid company, and you'll see this in our marketing, you'll see us trying to play both sides, right? Because we have to. We have two different revenue models. You'll see us say things like, Calendly helps you reduce the back and forth to find a time, sign up for free to enter our self-serve mode. But we'll also say things that are business outcome oriented to help us close those big deals, such as Calendly helps increase revenue for sales departments. And we'll try to use examples when we can. For example, add scheduling to your website to allow prospects to book a meeting when they're ready. This helps speed up sales cycles, a key to increasing revenue. Now, does it directly adding scheduling to your website print money right on day one? No. But a lot of people can make the leaps from, hey, it does this thing, it has this benefit, and then it has this business outcome, or at least contributes to it. Okay. So I'm going to stop there and see what you all think about that.
I'll dive right in here a little bit and sort of tee up to kind of bring a different perspective on homepage messaging and how we think about it. What's interesting is I think there's a lot of alignment in how we approach the difficulties, especially based on growth model. Our whole stance, and I should preface all of this, Jeff knows this, and we were explaining to Mark in the beginning, we usually hold up Calendly's homepage as like a gold standard. And we've probably done maybe 20 posts about Calendly, all positive, except this one that we're going to get into and chat through. Our view on how you actually tell that story from like, what's the product? What does it do? Connecting that early user to the business piece. It really does follow that logical progression of like, if you're clear on what the thing is, if you're clear on what you do with it, if you're clear on what we call the first order benefit, and to be specific for Calendly, it's what a much faster scheduling experience. I no longer have to send back and forth emails. You guys literally say this on your Hero and probably crush. And I'm excited to see some of the data behind this. When it comes to connecting the business outcomes, this is where everything gets tricky. The first thing is, will those stakeholders actually come to the page? And this is where we get into like the mechanics of how that conversation actually progresses. And sometimes it can, right? And this is where you kind of have to shape it as like the marketers. Are you going to, like when that user starts using it, are you going to point them to the page and say, hey, give this to your boss when you're trying to add more or do more things with the product? Or is it a whole other asset? Because the moment you start to unpack those second and third order outcomes on the same homepage, it really is a question of like, wait, is this for a different audience? It's like, oh, shoot, because the same reason why a user is going to use the product, they might not even care about the business outcomes that you get to down the page, where you end up with this split message. Delicate balance for sure. All the mechanics come into play 100%. The point here on Calendly's page, when I got to like the third scroll and you guys were starting to get into those business outcomes, we think that's fine. Our view was, are you jumping to the fifth order instead of walking out second, third, fourth order to get there? Because that was probably the most jarring point to me, because on its face, as you even noted, yeah, it doesn't turn on revenue day one. But that conversation of the logical connections of like, yeah, if I schedule more efficiently, my sales team has more time to work on other stuff, and it likely gets the people who are on the fence, who like didn't want to deal with the friction of booking, they come into the meetings. That might be an extra meeting you get on your calendar, and then those extra meetings might lead to more pipeline, and the more pipeline might lead to more closed deals. When you jump right to revenue, it starts to just become less believable in our view. And this is what I'm really interested to hear, how you guys are approaching even like customer marketing of using testimonials, because that was the thing you said that I 100% agree with. Can the customer say it for you? And I spent a little bit of time actually digging through like the videos you guys have in your case studies and testimonials. And like, I couldn't find someone who was promising the big revenue at the end, but you guys have a ton of support of people saying, hey, that jump from just better scheduling to better sales and marketing operations, you have that in abundance, which I think is really great. I would have loved personally to see that second and third order outcome business level messaging instead of the fifth order. But that's, I mean, we could flesh that out a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think, another thing you said is, can you have a sales team be able to tell that story and do that business case? And certainly, yes. I think it's important to share that if you look at our homepage, the hero of the homepage, like you pointed out, and I've said too, is very simple. Hey, Calendly helps you reduce the back and forth to find a time. Sign up here. The reason it's that way is that most people don't scroll down beyond that. Like a huge percentage of people only stay at the hero page and never scroll down. The fact that you scroll down, it means you're part of a small fraction of people that scroll. In these situations where people don't scroll down, the people that usually do scroll down are either people who kind of want to get more of the story versus like maybe they're an IT person, like an IT leader, they're a VP, and they're scrolling down to figure out, hey, is this like a toy? Is this all this does? It's a scheduling link, or has this got other features too? Can I add it to my website? Does it integrate with my stack, Salesforce and so forth? Does it do team-based scheduling? All that stuff. A lot of those people are also return visitors who maybe were the person who was using it for free in the beginning, and now they're in a position of management or whatever, and they want to learn what else it can do. To be completely frank, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, we could have an entire homepage that was just that hero, and that's it. We could just totally just do that and not have anything beneath, right? But I think our thinking is that the homepage is very powerful. It's the most visited page we have, probably one of the most visited marketing objects we have. Same with probably most companies out there. It gets millions of visitors. We need to try to not just play it lazy and figure out how do we communicate, and it's hard. How do we communicate in an elegant way, to your point, to the people at the top who are just maybe ICs, they're a recruiter, right? They have no buying authority. Maybe they're an SDR. They're signing up for free to reduce the back and forth of finding time. However, when people do scroll, maybe they're return visitors, maybe they are a VP and they have buying authority, be able to tell the business case story. And the reason is this. A lot of PLG companies don't want to hire big sales teams. It's not only a cultural thing of not wanting to have a big sales team, it's also an economic thing. We have a very, very small sales team for the amount of revenue we do, probably one of the smallest in the entire industry for the amount of revenue we do. So we have to do some of that work as marketers to seed the story of the business outcomes, even if it means somebody makes fun of it on LinkedIn. We still have to try because we can't hire a lot of salespeople to do that. We need to like seed it so that even if someone says, my SDRs have been using this thing, I'm a VP, I went to your site, it looked like kind of like a toy at the top, but you said something about increasing revenue or reducing speed to lead. Could you walk me through that? And at least it seeds the story for the salesperson versus they go in cold and try to convince them that there's a business outcome story.
Jeff, what do you think the mechanics are of like, I'm a user, I'm coming in, I'm just going to go to the hero. Yes, this is what I need. Maybe I do a little scroll and see some of the additional features. Even before I get to the business outcome unpacking, I start using Calendly, right? You guys have your PLG flywheel that works. What is the logical step? And I know it's diverse. This is probably part of the challenge too. You guys are very horizontal, so it probably looks different across industries and business types and functions. But primarily, even like if we take sales and marketing, right? That seems to be a primary target just in the way you guys order things. I'm making an assumption there. Would they actually come back to the homepage? Because this is something we talk about a lot. Like we have this thesis that the only people who read homepages are the people who are actually trying to figure out what it is you do. They might have heard of you. It's like, oh, I just booked through that. Let me go to their page. Like that seemed interesting, but I'm not really quite sure how it works or like what it's built for. But then once they know, and then once they come into the product since you're PLG, I believe the only time they're coming back to the homepage is to log back in. Like, why do I need to rediscover what the heck this thing is? And so, like, to your point of like, we could probably leave the hero. Does it mean that you should be unpacking that business case in a different part of the journey, whether it's through like a newsletter type retargeting thing of like, we know these are our users, you wait for hand raisers where you're giving them specific assets? I'd love to hear your thinking on that versus like, well, we put it on the page and like, it probably never gets read. Should it live somewhere else is kind of the question.
As a marketer in a hybrid company, PLG plus sales led or sales assist, there's certain guiding principles that get talked about. I should probably talk about it more on LinkedIn, but it'd probably offend some people. Some guiding principles are this: marketers.
Wait, hold on. People talk about things on LinkedIn and they're not trying to offend people?
Well, they're all consultants that do that. So
sorry, keep going.
I think that one of the guiding principles is this: a lot of product-led companies have consumer designers running the company. In a consumer world, you don't have a lot of sales messaging in there. You don't have a lot of like, click here, read this page in product about how we can help with business outcomes or whatever like that, right? It muddies up the beautiful, elegant customer experience, which is all about minimalism. You'll see this with Calendly. Like, we're often talking about how we can reduce things to make the user experience within the app simpler to use than we are about adding things. Like, I have to lobby so hard in a PLG company to be able to even get like any kind of marketing in there, versus go look at sales-led software. A lot of times they've got all kinds of pop-ups with this webinar and with this white paper and blah, 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 right? So that's one issue. Second issue is PLG companies, often a guiding principle is to reduce the amount of emails you can send. You almost have to like lobby with like a whole proposal to send a new kind of email within a PLG company, because again, it's about user experience, about customer experience. Too many emails are annoying, right? Now, we probably email too much as it is, but the marketing website is one thing that marketing gets to control, and that everybody, whether it's engineering, product, design, et cetera, feels like should be doing the heavy lifting of telling the full story, so that the product doesn't have to, and so the email doesn't have to, and so forth, which can mess up the overall customer experience.
What are your thoughts on the strategy of using the website and being really explicit and deliberate with like the titles of like, this is what you need to hear when you're ready to take this to the entire team, or literally even saying, send this to your boss so that they understand the benefits that you might get beyond, I'm a sales rep, I'm using it, it's great, I love it for my day-to-day, but here's how the team should be using it. Because we've came across that and we think it could be powerful, because that side that you have inside scoop on, I think is really valid. It's almost like that hybrid PLG. There's resistance to become hybrid. It's like the PLG works, leave it alone. But then there's probably pressure of like, sell bigger deals.
Yeah. I've talked about this in other podcasts, and I do talk about this on LinkedIn. It is one of the hardest jobs in B2B marketing right now is being in a hybrid, because you have two masters. You've got the product-led product management. Do we even need marketing or salespeople here? And then you've got the salespeople being like, why hasn't anybody listened to me? Everybody listened to me at last job at Cisco, right? So being able to like have those two ideas in your mind at the same time is really challenging for a lot of marketers. And it's really hard to address it in an elegant way that's not lame here or there. I love your idea. I'm going to try it, and I will credit you. This idea of just being more almost like consumery about it. Consumer companies do this, where it's like, click here, this is for your boss. I think it's a really fun kind of on-brand way to do it, versus like expecting people to kind of read this subtle journey of both like, sign up for free, you're an SDR right out of college, and then, oh, you're a CIO in a large company. That's really hard to do in an elegant way. And I think maybe being more humorous about it is a good idea.
In your PLG motion, are you seeing more, and share what you're comfortable with, is it more hand raisers that your sales team's working with, or is your sales team fighting to go and use like analytics, like let's go see where we're really embedded in companies, and then we'll launch into a proactive outbound or more targeted ABM type marketing piece?
It's more hand raisers.
What does that balance look like?
More hand raisers.
hand
Yeah,
raisers.
yeah. Again, we have a really, really small sales team. Like you'd be surprised how small. And it changes quarter to quarter. Like the economy is different. The economy has impacted. Tech economy has impacted us and impacted everybody. And so everybody is kind of trying to run leaner. And a lot of PLG companies are trying to run leaner. We in particular are, but we get a lot of our revenue from people that come inbound. So our sales team mostly deals with inbound leads. Right now, it might change. Inbound leads that come in. And sometimes the people are, it's funny, people that click talk to sales aren't always, might be somebody that is wanting to have a support ticket handled, right? And they have a live human body to handle it. Another person, and this drives salespeople crazy, right? The next one might be they are just an SDR and they want someone to do a demo and they have no buying authority. The next one might be, which is, the majority of the ones our sales team wants to talk to are like those VPs, C-level of larger companies. So this is another thing. Our sales team only works with a certain employee count and greater. I'm not going to give the number, but it's a pretty high employee count and greater. And they are mostly focused on having these really complicated discussions with different stakeholders. And what they don't like to have happen is to go and they gave us feedback on this. This is why we created the homepage this way. It just pains them to go into a discussion and the person has heard nothing about business outcomes and all they've heard about is reducing the back and forth. Because you can reduce the back and forth with Calendly for free. We would not have all the revenue we have if people were just using our free reduce the back and forth tool.
I mean, that's the tension, right? It's like, it's two things. It's if the company truly is PLG, which like the way you describe it, even as you move to hybrid, you guys are still 90+% PLG, it sounds like, to where when you think about the asset that is the homepage, like, don't try and be two things at once is the way we look at it. And it sounds like you share in part of that of like, we could probably just leave the hero and still crush and then solve for everything downstream. The other piece that I start to get really curious about is what's driving people to the page? Because I know you guys have industry pages, you've got functional business unit areas like sales and marketing pages. Are you trying to route folks to that piece in particular in terms of how people find and discover you? Because like that could be a way to alleviate, like put the business outcome talk there when someone's thinking about it contextually about what they're doing and not generically around this like core problem that Calendly solves. Yeah, tell me about that. I have one more.
So the homepage kills compared to any other page, right? And I think this is for a lot of companies that have lots of volume. We do have solutions pages. We have these pages that are like dedicated to industries, sales, industry, marketing, recruiting, da, 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 da. The challenge is they oftentimes get help finding those, right? They can, of course, go up in the nav, but a lot of people don't go up in the nav and look through all the stuff. And so we had this section on this old version of the site that you saw. We had this section where it was like, hey, salespeople, marketing people, recruiters, click here. Now, we could have just said, hey, click here and not seeded the story they were going to see. But the idea was we were going to seed the story they were going to see with some kind of business outcomes messaging that we thought would appeal to them and that they told us in interviews and so forth that appealed to them. But we also had right below it was a little bit of just the reduce the back and forth of as a customer success person in order to like get renewals or whatever, right? So it is there, and we do spend more time on the solutions pages themselves, but we felt like we needed to tease that.
Got it. I see. And how do you, I don't know if you have conversations with your AE team,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the ways, like the litmus test I put on the messaging that I saw was like twofold. Imagine I'm a Calendly AE, or even imagine I'm applying for a revenue role. Like I'm in front of a CRO who actually cares about revenue and moving all these needles. And I was trying to put myself in the shoes of like, what if they asked me like, what are all your ideas? What could we be doing to like really push the number? And like, to me, the coming at it from a point of like, well, I think we should change the way we schedule and like optimize the way we schedule. It's that gap that I would feel really uncomfortable with, where like the CRO might be like, wait, a scheduling tool? Like he might think I have a screw loose, even though there are logical jumps I could make to do that, versus if I came at it and said like, no, it's about more like streamlining the way that we do marketing and sales ops. Like that to me is a promise. And so like my question,
when we talk to them, what do they say?
Yeah, like what are your AEs doing? Like how do they navigate that? Because I've been an AE and it's like, whew, it's a tough bridge to create to the revenue from my view.
If you were to talk to, and not all these people are here, if you were to talk, we of course talk to the A's, we talk to the VP of sales, we talk to every single stakeholder. We have so many stakeholders in our head, you wouldn't even believe it. I think when you do talk to a lot of sellers and sales management, they actually want the business outcome messaging up in the hero. They want it to say like, Calendly will double your revenue, with, whatever. Not all of them are this way, but there have been ones that have said that, or they want category mentions in there because VPs of IT and CIOs buy categories. They go to Gartner conference. They're like, I got to think about a scheduling tool, a video conferencing tool, this ABM tool I want to get rid of. What's Gartner saying? And Gartner's like, the new category is digital transformation ABM. They buy categories. And like, if they had their way, we would say something like end-to-end solutions scheduling but provider. Not the ones that are here right now, but there are people that I've talked to in my life that would want that. And so we actually have to hold back in PLG companies. And I'm not saying this we do this at Calendly. Our sales team is the nicest ever. At a lot of other PLG companies that I've worked at or I know of, you got to hold the sales team back from pushing you into business outcomes or category creation.
Yeah, 100%. So there's this other piece now. I've talked about sales. I'm going to bring in product a little bit because this is something we see whenever we're working. We work primarily with early stage companies, but whenever we're working with companies that are further along, like a Calendly, that have this wave of success, there's always this tension of, have we capped out? Like, you guys have built the market leading automated meeting scheduling tool. Like, that's what I see and what sounds like it's right, and the revenue's all flowing. And it feels like some of this pressure is like, well, now, and you guys actually had some phrasing on this, like more than a scheduling tool, where like, are you building products number 2 and 3, right? When you move into like, no, we're going to build a marketing ops platform, which like you start to think about like the Chili Pipers of the world and some of those like, oh, we're going to do lead qualification. And I see some of that in the messaging. I'd be super curious to hear how you guys are balancing that. The thing you bump into then is like, what are you selling? Is it a scheduling tool or is it a marketing ops tool? Because then you lead to this confusion. And when you try and do both, again, our view is like, you probably have to separate them.
So this whole issue is going to become even more complicated in the future of Calendly. But I will preface, I should have prefaced all of this with something I said in a LinkedIn post. Before you even put that post in there, it was kind of serendipitous. It was pretty funny. About a month before, maybe 2 months before, started working with the lifecycle team, which owns the website. So the lifecycle team here owns email, they own the website, and they decide what big experiments we're gonna do. Hey, we think the homepage gets so much, let's test just doing self-serve messaging, the whole page down. I know we're killing it up top, but let's see if we can get them to move down the page. And we're gonna use various design engineering techniques to try to get them to move down, because it's really frustrated them that most people hover at that top. They really want people to move down. So that might be one experiment. Another experiment might be, hey, actually, we're killing it over in enterprise sales right now, not in PLG, there was a time when the economy was great. We were doing great there. And we want to make it the whole homepage about enterprise deals. And we'll just organically get PLG coming in, right? These are the kind of conversations you have, and you run different experiments. So before you even wrote that piece, we had been working with them on an experiment to try to get people to move down the page. And we are experimenting with, in this experiment, just addressing our self-serve IC into the market. So you're going to see a page that comes out and you're going to be like, they listen to me. You're going to see this page that comes out that it's just basic feature benefits. Now, we're running it with like 10% of traffic right now. You might not see it, but you all might end up in the cohort. If it performs well, and if it doesn't hurt our inbound leads for sales too much, we might run it for a while until the enterprise side of the market is improved. Our PLG market is doing great. We still do great credit card sales with, 200-person teams, right? Where the entire industry is challenged, not just us, is those big enterprise deals at the Oracles, the Ciscos of the world who have consolidated tools, right? And so we will pivot back and forth depending on how the economy is going, depending on our businesses. Okay, all of that said, should we just be doing scheduling? Do we really want in the next 20 years, that's all we do is scheduling? I don't think so. I think that's like not very fun. So what you're going to see, and I'm probably saying it first here, right? Breaking the news here. What you're going to see increasingly is that Calendly will keep focusing on the front door of meetings. We will keep trying to be the best, the Kleenex of scheduling. We will keep building out team-based features that make us like a scheduling automation platform, which we've been telling that story of a while. And then you're going to start seeing us help you prepare for a meeting. And then you're going to start seeing us help you engage better in the meeting. And then you're going to see us help you follow up on the meeting and then schedule. And so that kind of like meeting life cycle, if you will, if I can use that jargon here, you're going to see us play more and more in that area or partner with companies more and more in that area. And when that happens, imagine the messaging challenge of telling that story for early adopters of that, probably smaller businesses to start, while still preserving all the huge enterprises that just want to use this for scheduling because they have a bunch of other tools for all that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
It makes total sense. I don't want your job when that happens.
Yeah, I don't
if I'm
either.
being direct. Because it's just going to pull, like, your question was perfect. Do we just want to do scheduling? And I think it's fair, ambition-wise, to like, no, we want to do more. There's opportunities in front of us. You guys have exposure to these dynamics and mechanics that happen across these different types of teams. It's only natural to solve more of the problem. I think the big choice will be, how integrated do you keep it? Like, of course it will be. And from a marketing perspective, product perspective, of course, it's likely going to be really integrated. But do you go to market in the same way where you suddenly become the meeting tool of sorts and not the meeting scheduling tool? Or do they become modules? And it's different for every business. Our general point of view that we recommend is keeping them separate until you've really solved that piece, and then bolt them together and market them as a key piece. And but that would be, I mean, you got a lot of work.
No, yeah, and I've been thinking about it a lot, and I say, like, we have this mantra here where it's like, it might be hard, but do it anyway, right? And so it might be hard to tell the whole story on the homepage, but the general vibe is figured out. If it was easy, everybody would do it. Me personally, where I'm leaning toward recommending is kind of a separate storytelling mechanism for this. I might not get my way, but I think that just like you do with developers, where there's like a developer section of your website for like if you have an API, or just like you might for enterprise, where it's like an enterprise section where you tell the enterprise story, even though those sections don't get as many clicks as a homepage, I do think as we start to kind of build out this new story, it deserves its own special place, so as not to confuse everybody that might be CIOs just wanting the best scheduling tool out there.
I think, outside looking in, I think it's your biggest wedge. I think it's going to be for a long time, even as you guys add more products. And then all these other pieces truly become the upsell, cross sells. And then I think the question becomes, what motion is that? And if it's still PLG, how do you interweave an upsell and cross sell into a PLG? Does it become just an activation step where you're not like marketing it as much as you're just embedding it in? I guess time will tell as you guys solve this.
It'll be fun. This is why we do it. Otherwise, just go work for some other company.
So, Jeff, I got to ask before we get into the last part of the episode, how many different people or functions are involved in this at Calendly? Because I feel like, you're talking to somebody at a very early stage startup where if I want to go make a change to the homepage, I can probably just go into WordPress and change it myself and let people know that I changed something. But that's probably not how this works at Calendly, I assume, right?
Nope. I would say it's not as like bureaucratic as like you might think. It's still very agile and an awesome place to work, or I wouldn't have been here as long as I have been. However, there are multiple stakeholders. I've worked in tiny startups under 100 people where I could just do whatever. And that was some of the joy to it. But, I got some feedback from a boss once. He was a CMO. He's a CMO of a very large publicly traded SaaS company. And he said, anybody can like make things as a marketer happen in a tiny startup. You can just do whatever you want. He says, what separates us from animals, and I think he was reading Homo sapiens, is that we have to be able to motivate large groups of people to do something even when they don't agree. Okay. And so I took that to heart, and I've been working on that the last several years, is how to listen to these stakeholders, the sales VP who wants to see something, the CS team, the product team, the marketing team, demand gen, lifecycle. They all have a lot of times different opinions. And I think, and I tell this to my team all the time, the real job of being a product marketer in a larger company, particularly a hybrid PLG, two people in your head at once, sales leader, product leader, is about not necessarily the work, is much about is being sure you can do the work, and that you're listening to others and you're not being, stubborn about it and just doing my way or the highway. I was a consultant before I was on the SaaS side. I love just telling people what to do, and then they had to go figure out the politics of it, right? I can't do that in this role. I need to listen to them because it's the right thing to do. So the people that are involved here are Lifecycle. A lot of times they own the website. And so it's either them bringing me an idea. And I have a great relationship with our head of growth. It's growth, and Lifecycle is part of that. they bring ideas like, hey, we're looking at the data and we want to test, maybe going all enterprise messaging on the homepage because demand gen maybe needs some help right there because they mostly work with the sales team. Or they might come back and say, actually, in this economy right now, we should be focused on our self-serve credit card side of the business. Let's make the whole homepage that. Or they might say, let's try to do both, which was the case that this homepage you viewed was from, where it was like, let's see if we can do the impossible. We'll get like award-winning PLG hybrid, work here and see. It wasn't award-winning. Make the header at the top this story, and then we're going to move down and tell more of the teams-based story. They drive some of that thinking because they also own our marketing data team. Okay. They got the awesome data team telling them what's working, what's not, what the industry trends are, economics, blah, blah, blah. And they a lot of times come to ideas with us. We go to them as well with ideas saying like, hey, customers are telling us this. They're using this kind of language, for example, to describe these features or these business outcomes. Let's, add this here.
This is one big experiment for you right now, and I'd love to get Rob's take on this, just given what Fletch does. But Jeff, what are some of the metrics that you all are looking at right now to measure the success of this experiment, either leading indicators or lagging indicators?
Well, number one for this experiment is freemium signups. We want to increase freemium signups, and this could be, it will likely be all kinds of freemium signups. It will be yoga instructors that use this, life coaches, to VPs that are trying to figure out what the heck their SDRs are using because they have an assistant and they don't even want to use it, to middle managers of RevOps teams. Like, you're going to see all kinds of people signing up for free. And that's one of the main KPIs that we're evaluating for this experiment. Then we also have to evaluate, hey, did this hurt hand raisers for sales? Right? Did we, by focusing mostly on messaging that's about feature benefit, ad scheduling your website, makes it easier for people to book with you, did that hurt our ability to get sales VPs, recruiting VPs, CIOs to raise their hand and feel like this wasn't just a toy? Okay. We'll also evaluate, and we'll talk to AEs to do this. Once the AEs got these new leads, were they having to do a lot of work trying to explain that this thing is more than just a scheduling link that you could just use for free? And why are we even talking to you? Right. And so we'll be talking to them as well and make sure we're not creating more pain and more work for them with this more simplified messaging. Then, of course, we also evaluate credit card upgrades. So we don't just look at like whether the person signed up for free, but did downstream, maybe in 6 months to a year, did those freemium signups result in either a credit card upgrade or a talk to sales when it's appropriate? And that's usually like a VP of a department, in larger companies.
Interesting. So then what's like the actual time frame that you've defined for this experiment then?
Well, we have to get statistical significance. So we'll start with a small group, percentage of our traffic, and then go from there. And, I don't know how long that'll take. The math will play out. It could take, to see all those indicators. The freemium sign up thing's easy. It's the first thing you do on day one. You sign up for free. Whether you, upgrade it with your credit card, that could take weeks, right? It could take months. Whether you decided to eventually tell your boss about this as an SDR, telling the VP of sales about it, and then they raise their hand to talk to sales, that could take a year. So it'll play out, and we will evaluate different metrics along the way that we think will spike at different points. And everything we do is based on that math. We don't just do things just based on gut decisions. We try things based on gut decisions, but we don't just do it because, hey, let's just standardize this to 100% because I feel like it, or I did it in my past job or something like that,
Which happens far too many times. Rob, we're coming up on time, but how does this stack up to what you typically see with Fletch clients and like what you're measuring for leading and lagging indicators?
So for us, it's important to keep in mind, we come at this from a positioning and messaging angle. The folks we work with are usually earlier stage. They're having a harder time with this combination of who do I aim this message at and what the hell do I say? Right. So it's a little bit more, I would say, like foundational in terms of the messaging. And we are no way conversion rate optimizing experts at all. So like when we look at experimentation a little differently, and hats off to Jeff, because when we do think about conversion rate optimization, it goes beyond, oh, did they convert? The fact that you're looking across the whole journey I think is brilliant. I think it's the way to do it, to actually understand how did they get from A to B to C to D to this end result. And so for us, the things we look at for testing, there's not a lot of quantitative data. And so when we work with folks, there's two things we look at from a conceptual basis. Number one, clarity. If no one understands what you're saying, they can't even evaluate whether it's valuable or compelling, right? let alone believable. And so the way that we coach around testing on that, there's a tool. I know we were just down here in Austin at Spring. Winter is a tool, really easy way to get feedback. They bump into this clarity challenge all the time. We're friends with Pep and all their service team. They've got like a CRO team as well. And they constantly see people submitting homepages where 80% of the time the feedback is, I just don't know what this is. And when you're in that spot, running any conversion rate right there of did they convert doesn't tell you why. Did they not get it, or do they not actually think it's a good idea or compelling for their business? So that's number one once you get to clarity. As far as testing quality, it's kind of ironic. We craft these homepages, but the best place to actually test whether the messaging is right and working is in a room like this. And so we tell these founders and startup teams we work with, take your homepage, and when you get a meeting, whether they came through the page or not, bring up the homepage in the first 60 seconds. Do your elevator pitch, scroll through the page, and then pause and listen. All the nonverbal cues, the questions they ask, it's going to tell you a hell of a lot more than like, did they convert? And then use that as a basis to then run your like discovery-based sales model as you go. That's going to tell you so much more and help you fine tune, because it's much more of clarity of like, is this what I'm building? Is this the problem I'm actually solving? Is this the audience that cares? And it's qualitative driven. And so I know you talked about like gut feel. There should be some intuition when you're a founder or in an early stage startup marketing team. You should be spending time with your prospects and really respect what do they know when they get to the site.
Yep.
As a way of figuring that out.
We do qualitative as well. We do these reviews, and we use, many of the different services. You mentioned and other ones. I like it best for asking the customer, and it's really tough to get to statistical significance with those because it's a lot of times I can only find 3 VPs that can talk, and I need like 50, right, to impress anybody. So what I like about it is helping them weigh in on how we should talk about something. Because, I don't know if you've read the Mom Test, great book on user testing. And customers don't always know what motivates them, right? They say in the book, customers lie, but or suggest it. I wouldn't go that far, but I think a lot of times people don't know if they're influenced. So people don't always know if they're influenced by feature benefit messages or feature benefit business outcome messaging. But I want to know if you were influenced by it, if you were going to be influenced by it, how would you want me to phrase it, right? What kind of words would you use for your job if you were influenced by this? Does that make sense?
It does, but do you get to ask those questions, the hypotheticals? Our view is asking, if I did this, would you like this better? Is a really poor simulation of the insight you have, which is they won't know until they see it. And so whenever we talk to these teams, they're like, don't think of it as a test. Go run your sales process. At the end, ask for money. Then you'll hear the truth to kind of slice through that mom test theory versus the hypothetical. But you're spot on of like the significance you're not going to get. And you do have to lean a little bit into like your intuition, especially when you're early.
We went and looked at freemium signups, and we went and found people that were VPs. Like we watched the freemium signups happen in real time, which is like dozens and dozens every day. And we went and said, okay, there's a VP of a sales department. There's a VP of recruiting. We got on the phone with them and asked them, like, what are you looking to do? What motivates you? Kind of went through their whole journey. If you were to upgrade, what would you be looking for? And some of them wanted business outcome messaging. Some of them didn't. Some of them just wanted to save time. Some people aren't held accountable for business outcomes. Others were like, I can't buy this unless you tell me it can increase revenue. And then we watched their journey to see whether they upgraded or not, and then what motivated them to upgrade. And this was like a several month project, right? But that, like, getting down to like the beginning of someone's journey and watching what they actually do versus what they say is very helpful, but a lot of work.
Yeah. For
Guys,
sure.
this was awesome.
Oh yeah, I know we're at time.
We are right at time. I'd love to keep going, but Jeff, I think you signed yourself up for another episode whenever you have to update the homepage for like 6 different products down the line. So I really enjoyed this. I learned a lot. It was way more fun than I was expecting it to be, and I was expecting it to be fun. So thank you for coming on the Proof Point. I appreciate you both.
Yeah, your boss should suggest more stuff to you, Mark.
He does. Evan, just know that if you made it this far listening to this episode, this one was for you. So thank you both.
Thanks. Great to meet you, Rob.
Appreciate
Great
you
to meet you,
guys.
Mark.